Hello again. I'm here with my final wrap up for the month of May, and I'm going to cover 4 books. They are 2 sci-fi books, 1 fantasy book, and 1 nonfiction. The nonfiction I actually did talk about before in a book tag, I believe. It is called The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. It is the true story of Timbuktu after it got taken over by Al Qaeda, and how there were all of these old manuscripts and sacred texts that were collected and were smuggled out of the country to prevent Al Qaeda from destroying it. In the story, Al Qaeda actually did burn a bunch of texts, and you see the brutality of Al Qaeda, not just in book burning, but just the brutality with what they believe and the brave people who smuggled out these books or helped. I really like the story. Even though it was a pretty sad state of affairs, seeing what Al Qaeda does to regions when they take it over, I still really like this book because it did give you some hope. It was a really good page turner. The story was actually very well done. It was almost written like a fictional book. It was really well done. I really liked it. That's my review for The Badass Librarians of Timbuktu. A great short little book that I think everybody would like. Next story I want to talk about are the 2 sci-fi books that I read. Both of these in a series. They are the second book of the Expanse series, Caliban's War, and the third book in the series, Abaddon's Gate. I can't tell you too much about the series without spoiling it, but the second book to me was kind of a smaller, cheaper version of the first book. Kind of dealt with some of the same issues. I wasn't as impressed with this book as I was with the first book, but the end of this book was really interesting, and it definitely set up this book, which I love. If I would have just read this book and didn't own this book, I might have almost stopped reading the series, because I wasn't as crazy about Caliban's War. I did feel like it was a retread of the first story. Abaddon's Gate is really good. It definitely, pardon the pun, expands the Expanse series. I can't wait to read the 4th book. I am looking forward to reading it. I want to see where this series goes from here. And again, I'm just so glad I actually picked up the 3rd book. Second book, you need to read it for the background. If you're not that crazy about it, just know that it gets way better in the 3rd. At least that's my personal opinion. So those are my reviews for the 2nd and 3rd Expanse series books. And the last book I want to talk about is Virtual Mode. I also talked about how I wanted to read this book because I found the 2nd and 3rd book in this series, and I read this when I was very young, and I wanted to see how it holds up. This book does have problems, and as a younger person reading this, did not realize that it had problems. I still like it, but there is definitely problematic characters. This is a story about Colleen, who meets Darius, a person from another plane of existence. The story is that Darius is a person who gives joy to all of his subjects, and that he gets married to use the joy of his wife to also continue to spread joy, because he would get burnt out. Even having a wife, she would get tired and burnt out. They don't die, but basically they're not as effective anymore passing out joy to this society. So most people who have his position wind up marrying multiple women, I guess, and using their joy. Sounds like a really weird premise, but the concept is he wants to find somebody from another reality, thinking that because they're from another reality, maybe their joy won't sap, and he could actually marry for love and not just marry to continue giving joy to everybody else. So he meets Colleen. He hones in on Colleen. The reason he hones in on Colleen is Colleen is a very suicidal, depressed individual who, if Darius never showed up, would have killed herself. She's a cutter. When we first meet her, she's a very sad individual. There is definitely insta-love to the highest degree in this book. For when she meets Darius, she doesn't even understand his language, but in the beginning, but somehow they fall in love very quickly. But she doesn't believe that he's from another universe. She thinks he's crazy, so she doesn't agree to go with him until she sees him disappear, and then realizes, oh my god, I should have went with him. So the story basically is that Darius can only travel one way to meet her directly. The first time he meets her, he goes right to her from his reality, but he can only do that once. In order to meet her again, he has to travel through what's called a virtual mode. I did like Piers Anthony explaining computers in this, explaining 86 architecture, and explaining like virtual space And it was actually pretty interesting considering the time that this book was written. So that was kind of interesting. I actually liked that. The concept of the virtual mode is basically they're walking through all of these different realities to meet each other. And of course, that's where you meet the main antagonist bad guy. And that's the fun part of the book. That to me was really the interesting part of the book. Colleen is a very depressing character and there's a strong insta-love that did kind of turn me off. But once I started seeing the fantasy world, once I started reading about dogs driving cars and telepathic horses, it was just a fun read to read through. While I didn't really like the characters as much, there was definitely some problematic elements in this book. In the end, I still kind of enjoyed it. I still look forward to continuing the series and seeing how well it goes on from there. I did like the villain, and I did like the ending. The ending is a cliffhanger, so now I could finally actually finish what the ending was. And I would give it maybe a little over a 3-star. It was a good book, maybe not a great book, somewhere maybe 3.25, 3.5, somewhere in that range. That is my review for Piers Anthony's Virtual Mode. And those are all of the books that I read in May. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.